To him. And when my foster parent found out, she said, "Why are you being a slag?" I was 12 and he was 19.
Sometimes I was picked up by the men after school. I'd walk out of school where I was getting bullied and just go to a man's flat and take drugs.
They go for the girls with the rubbish family lives because they know they will get away with it. They give you things and make you think they are your friend.
The voices of young girls interviewed as part of a report which makes painful reading for those who thought Rochdale was an isolated case. Ann Coffey says sexually exploiting children has become a social norm in a region where just 1 in 5 police officers are trained in spotting the signs of abuse and where the public still don't fully understand what grooming is.
Listening to the voices of those young people, it is quite evident that they feel under pressure, from exploitative relationships, and that is worrying. But actually, in a sense, that's all our failure. That's not simply the failure of children's services or the failure of the police. It's our failure.
So she's recommending child sexual exploitation be declared a priority public health issue like smoking or drug abuse. She says all frontline police officers must be trained to better spot the signs of abuse. There needs to be a greater public awareness of what grooming actually means. And she recommends a change in the questioning and tone towards alleged victims by barristers in child abuse cases.
This is Unity Radio 92.8 FM, and today we're talking about the issues that affect young people.
It's also backing a radio show by young people so they can talk about the issue of exploitation, a problem which some children face almost every day. This report finds that for some young schoolgirls in Greater Manchester, it's become a regular occurrence to be approached by men outside their school gates. For some girls and boys, it's normal for men to ask them to get into their cars. One girl is quoted as saying that it happens so often by so many men that the police can't do anything. But critics of this report say the police must and can do more, and that Ann Coffey is far too lenient on them.
I know it was commissioned by the Police Commissioner for Greater Manchester, but that shouldn't have stopped it from reporting on the difficulties that we've seen in GMP in terms of prosecuting these cases successfully. There's been a lacklustre approach.
I think the report is helpful and makes some good contributions to this debate, but I also think we need to be quite frank that those agencies, particularly the police and social services, who often know about these people and know about what is happening, they need to intervene and act more quickly.
The Police and Crime Commissioner for Greater Manchester, Tony Lloyd, says that is something GMP is determined to get right and says he will take today's findings very seriously. Daniel Hewitt, ITV News.
They would line up at least 10 males a night. They would, if she refused, they would beat her.
Julie says her daughter was raped and abused by gangs of Asian men from the age of 12. That abuse lasted years.
As a parent, I went to the police and I also went to services. I even went to MPs, emailed them in the littlest bit of a hope that something would be done to protect her, but it carried on.
Julie showed me paperwork that appears to prove that the authorities knew what was happening. She even followed her abusers, took photographs.
And even in one respect, we'd give information to the police as well of one of the houses that she was taken to.
This was a house that you knew was one of the places where your daughter was being abused?
Yes.
And you gave this to the police?
Yes, we gave it to the police, but yet she was still allowed to be abused. They knew. They looked on it that she was 14 years of age, and that's what 14 years do, and it's not the case at all. My daughter had the right to be protected.
Her daughter's case is far from unusual. According to the report, many children are still being preyed upon. Police told Ann Coffey they have around 260 live investigations into allegations of child sexual exploitation, with 174 incidents on their books recorded as crimes. 18 of these, they say, involve multiple perpetrators. But experts tell us those figures are just the tip of the iceberg.
The police would quite clearly tell us if there isn't a complaint from the child, then we don't have a victim, and if we don't have a victim, then we don't have a crime.
Sarah Robotham was a crisis team health worker in Rochdale. It was her job to advise teenage girls in the town on their sexual health, a job that brought her into contact with countless victims.
the council, the police, health. Absolutely, I believe that their agenda is we have to improve public confidence regardless. So we have to let the public know that we're great or we're so much better than we ever have been. Now maybe some of that is true, but what they're doing in that process is hiding the fact that they absolutely were not.
Margaret Oliver's a former detective with Greater Manchester Police. She investigated child sexual exploitation in Rochdale. She says the Coffey report is smoke and mirrors.
She has employed willful blindness in writing this report. She is aware of the ethnicity of the offenders, the profile of the offenders and the profile of the victims. It's an intentional attempt to play down what are the facts about this kind of on-street grooming, that the offenders are predominantly Pakistani men and the victims are almost exclusively young white school children.
The Coffey report, critics claim, has not gone far enough. And in doing so, they say, the system has once again let victims down. Matt O'Donoghue.
Response by you to Margaret Oliver's claims there that you've ignored the racial element.
Well, I did talk about it in my report, and indeed I talked about it at the launch of the report this morning.
But not enough, she says.
Well, I was very clear that street grooming was predominantly associated with Asian men, but I went on to point out that the evidence I've gathered across Greater Manchester actually demonstrates that 85% of child sexual exploitation involves single offenders.
Okay, now it's true that children haven't been listened to in the past. We get that. I think, isn't there a danger though that your report is a series of stories rather than actual recommendations on what needs to be done? Because these are all things we kind of know. Since Rochdale, we know this is going on.
Well, let me be quite clear with you. I wasn't inspecting the police. That is the job of HMIC. What I was asked...
In that case, then, what was the point of what you were doing?
I was looking at changes in attitudes and culture since Rochdale, because one of the issues that was identified in the Rochdale report was the attitude of the police and children's services to victims when they tried to report what was happening to them. And I was asked to look what had changed since then. So it was looking since Rochdale, since 2010, since 2012. So that's what my focus, because that is when I was interested in attitudes, and that's why I went to a great deal of trouble to talk to 150 people across Greater Manchester, talk to over 70 children, and also at a great deal of trouble to make sure that their voices and their experience was heard, because I wanted people to hear from them.
And it's important, it is important that there is cultural change, as you point out, but cultural change can be led by the law as well, couldn't it?
It is.
We need to prosecute people who do this, but we also need to prosecute the people who keep missing it and ignoring it, the police, the social services.
But that's exactly what I said in my report. I was very critical about the fact that the level of prosecutions were very low in relation to the recorded...
Yeah, 1,000 out of 13,000 reported cases.
Yes, but that's the criticism I actually made in my report. So I was very critical of that. And I have always been very critical of the criminal justice system, because I think that one of the issues in relation to children is often when they get into the witness box, they're not seen as children. It is not understood that they are vulnerable. Often they are blamed for their own sexual abuse. Some children get justice in the criminal justice system and other children do not. And that is not right. All children should get justice, irrespective of how they look like and irrespective of what they wear.
Ann Coffey, thank you very much indeed for